Welcome back. Again in the concert hall. I hope everybody enjoyed the collaborative sessions. I chatted here and there with some of you, and the feedback was very, very nice and inspiring, I think. I hope it was very joyful and maybe also provoking. And we want to thank all the contributors now that offered workshops. Maybe you could stand up, all the people who gave a workshop or panels or paper sessions. Maybe give a big applause. Come on, stand up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Such an inspiring morning and afternoon already. Thank you so much for coming together like this. We're now thrilled to welcome our second panel on collaborative learning and action. As we said, collaboration and the coming together is really key for what we want to do. So not just as a form, but also as a theme, as a value. And that's why we invited people from different fashion-related networks around the world to come together. So thank you so much for joining us. Elisabeth Hackspiel-Mikosch from Germany, Lesiba Mabitsela from South Africa, Matthew Needham joining us online from the UK, Timo Rissanen coming from Australia, Sophie Courdian from France. And I would like to welcome and introduce also our facilitator, Mi Medrado from Brazil. Mi Medrado is a decolonial fashion researcher activist aiming to elaborate methodology tools for the fashion future in the global south. And her collective was recently nominated in Innovation and Reading Promotion for the Jabuti Award. Mi co-founded Brazilian Decolonial Studies and Fashion Network and Fashion and Decolonization Global South Crossings Working Group, and is part of a number of different international networks like the Research Collective on Decoloniality. Thank you very much for facilitating, and over to you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I am welcoming you to the Collaborative Learning Action panel. It's a pleasure to be also here today to facilitate it and to be with these wonderful panelists. As the time is short, so I'm going to already start make my first question for you. The idea is, so I will ask the question, in the first round, they're going to also introduce themselves, that we're going to also take a more advantage of our time. So think of collectives, clubs, unions, are arrangements that intersect people from diverse social and ethnic, gender and class background. Can you share what your network does and how it fosters the fashion values and practices? How does it enable and unveil the multiplicity of clothing systems? Who would like to go first?
Yes? No? No. Yes? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hello? No? No. Okay. Yes. Thank you. My name is Elisabeth Hackspiel-Mikosch. I used to be a professor for fashion theory and fashion design at the AMD, Akademie Mode und Design. This is the Department of Design of the Hochschule Fresenius, University of Applied Sciences, and we were in Düsseldorf. Sorry, that's a long title. Now I'm retired since March, but this is not why I'm here. I'm here because I am one of the three founders of a network, of a German network called Netzwerk Mode Textil, Network Fashion Textile. And we are a network with members in the German-speaking countries. It's mainly German-speaking. And this is for people who are interested in fashion, also the cultural history and cultural science of fashion and textile and clothes. So we are interdisciplinary. We have members, we are about 300 members. We have members from universities, professors, students, fashion designer, costume designer, stage costume designer, I mean, journalists. We have a lot of members who are teachers who are working at universities training teachers for textile design. So it's a broad variety of people, and our network is growing, and we have working groups. And one of the working group is sustainability, and another working group is against cultural appropriation. There are kind of overlaps, though. And the working group for what we still call sustainability is very active. We have about 30 members, and we meet to discuss various issues of sustainability. And now, diversity is an issue because, I mean, it's German, German-speaking countries, German, Austria, and Switzerland. So the diversity is not so big, but we are men and women, I can say. And so, yeah, diversity is still an issue we are working on.
Thanks so much for having me. I am Timo Rissanen. I am one of the founding members of the Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion, and that's the organization I represent here today. I'm also an associate professor in fashion and textiles at the University of Technology, Sydney, and also the research director of a new Centre of Excellence in Sustainable Fashion and Textiles at UTS. I have prepared notes because I am extremely jet-lagged, and when I'm in that state, I am very wordy, and I do want us to finish this panel at some point, and also give other people the chance to speak, so excuse me for looking at my notes. But so a bit of background, the Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion was founded at the end of 2018 by Linda Groves, Kate Fletcher, Matilda Tam, and myself. It really came from a call by Linda at the conference that many of you were at London College of Fashion, the Global Fashion Conference. Linda called for the formation of a union based or inspired by the Union of Concerned Scientists, which had been founded in 1969, who took a stance of turning research away from military technology towards the solution of pressing environmental and social problems. The Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion takes a clear stand against fashion industry's use of our research, and that means all of our research, to greenwash rapidly expanding growth-dependent system, which we have all been talking about today and we'll be talking about tomorrow as well. I'll just, many of you are members, and thank you. I also want to thank the board for helping me prepare for today. I actually stepped down from the board at the end of last year. Karishma Kelsey is here from the union board, which is great to see you. Throughout the questions and answers, I will reference both our manifesto and our code of conduct because they really, I think, sum up the key ideas. But just manifesto point 2, I think, which is to advocate for whole systems and paradigm change beyond current norms and business as usual, which includes rejecting the status quo, which maintains economic, legislative, and policy frameworks that prioritize profits at the cost of people and planet. I think that sums up a lot of what we do. And also point 4, which is to express our determined opposition to ill-advised and destructive fashion projects. And that's where our code of conduct is also guiding our actions. So.
Hello. Firstly, this is a really soft chair. It's so comfortable. But yeah, my name is Isibo Mabitsela. Myself and Erica de Greef co-direct the African Fashion Research Institute, so AFRI for short. I guess in terms of how we came to be,
We still have 2 minutes.
Sure. I think maybe what describes the group that we represent here today, not just us, but it's a growing community of interdisciplinary artists, people who don't have phones, people who are working on in spaces that I kind of felt or I found myself in growing up as an artist, as a fashion designer, as someone who does performance art as well, someone who uses performance theory to speak about fashion. So we create that space for a lot of other people that are in this room. And we do that from a pillar of creating fashion education, but that's decolonial, but one that's digital so that it's able to, foster collaboration from across the continent, including the diaspora. I think that's pretty precise. I don't want to go too much more than that.
Thank you for sharing with us what we have been doing, what is you're looking at. And now we have two participants from that could not be here today. So let's see, probably Sophie, would you like to speak first?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very sorry not to be with you today, but I'm also happy to be able to attend it online. So my name is Sophie Kurdzian. I am an assistant professor at the American University of Paris. And in 2018, in collaboration with the French Ministry of Culture, I co-created the research network Culture de Mode. And the idea was, and still is, to bring together scholars and fashion professionals, including designers, journalists, engineers, curators, activists, to develop research on and through fashion. So we work with museums, universities, schools, designers and associations, mainly in France. But since 2 years, we collaborate with the Institut Français to expand our actions, our initiative in the world, if I can say that. And so far, we have collaborated with researchers from Indonesia, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, and soon with Japan and China. From Japan and China. So for the moment, we have 320 members from France, but also from other countries. And also we have different working groups. One is about heritage, another one on crafts, on métiers d'art and digital. And the last one is on the social and ecological impact of fashion. So just to be brief, but we have created this network first of all because in 2018, and maybe this is still the case, France was quite behind many countries in terms of fashion research. So in France, as you probably all know, we are very proud of our designers, of our history, of our savoir-faire. But in fact, when you look at PhD programs, at what really happened in the academia, fashion is still considered as too superficial, and so we don't have a lot of fashion share or research program on fashion. So this is why when we have decided to create a network, because either there is nothing on fashion in the academia, or when fashion is studied, most of the time it's considered as a luxurious industry. We talk about the grand couturier, the amazing design, but we never address what I think can really be, and I hope I can give more detail about that, but we never talked about, the labor in fashion, immigration in fashion. So we really try to deconstruct also the very notion of Paris fashion and the way fashion is taught in France. And I think so it's a question of research, but also of teaching, because it's very important, especially in this country where fashion is part of our culture, our DNA in a way, that we deconstruct this idea of high fashion, of grand couturier, that really is a tiny part of the story, but the bigger picture is always missing in the books and articles you can read in French. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move to Matthew, who is from the Trash Club.
Hello, I'm so sad not to be there. I was really excited and looking forward to meeting you all at the conference. But like Sophie, I'm glad to join online. So my name is Matthew Needham. I'm the sustainability lecturer at Central St Martin's for Fashion. So I teach across the fashion program, but I'm also the co-founder and director of a global community and professional network called Trash Club. So Trash Club started in 2021. It was just after the pandemic. So as a creative myself and my co-founder Katie Mason, we realized that it was a time where creators were really struggling, especially freelance creatives and independent creatives. So we decided to start a conversation around this, which progressed into Trash Club and has now become a global community. So we're driven by the belief of art and design and sustainability and coexistence to positively impact our world. We have hubs now in 10 different countries around the world. And really what happened is the conversation has expanded into different disciplines. So we have artists, designers from different countries, different hyperlocal spaces, academics, students, and it's really kind of a space where we try and holistically support our members and promote the idea of well-being and knowledge exchange, which is super important for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's not wonderful to see how all of these collectives are creating bridges to articulate ideas to be circulated in and outside academia. So I think having that in mind, it seems to me that coalition is the key to overcoming the colonial perspective of silence and erasure of knowledge and practice. So it seems to me that also there is another thing that connecting should become a praxis, but also a practice of holding spacing, where the demonstration of diversity and the complexity of the fashion studies field must account for perspectives and feelings. It seems to me, and that's why I would like to make this question, what are our ideas and thoughts on promoting and supporting restorative actions to increase the visibility of fashion and social environmental justice? Who would like to go first? Yep. Let's change that. And yeah, because as you notice, they are just answered the same questions. So we all have to answer. Yes, exactly.
Visa applications, probably number one. And that's like, that came from a recent project that we did do between two artists from Uganda and a few artists, or chosen artists from KZN in South Africa and myself. It's called the Pan-African Research Residency. The idea was to find possibilities of bark cloth in KZN, South Africa. And we had a lot of hurdles that we had to jump through despite the potential for this to be a game changer in terms of trade and knowledge between Africans from the continent, because we already have that sense of mistrust between Africans in a way that I think we need to kind of really talk about borderless societies so that we can build knowledges. In this way, what happened is that, for instance, we had a 14-day residency and the one artist was only given 10 days. And that wasn't enough for us to kind of engage in the project, especially because it was the exact same artist who inspired the project, in essence, to go and look for the tree. Now everybody's involved, the whole botanical gardens people are involved, and we're still also dealing with funding, but that's another conversation. But I think very pivotal, and this is a product of a tree of a different kind. We're talking about issues of visa applications, we're talking about issues of funding. I think those is probably the first place to start off with.
So the Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion is we are a global network of members that represents over 40 countries, and with that comes a fair bit of cultural and linguistic diversity, which the union views as a strength, and of course there is a lot more to do in that to expand that diversity. But going back to the manifesto, actually the first point of the manifesto is to create an activist knowledge ecology, that is to develop a system of knowledge about fashion and sustainability that is geared towards taking action and fostering authentic change. Now, the word ecology in this manifesto point really refers to us being networked and connected through all of that diversity, the geographic diversity, the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity, and connected towards knowledge dissemination and sharing, but also acknowledging in the, pluriversality has been in the discussions today, and it needs to be acknowledged that ideas of sustainability can vary and should vary from location to location and from language to language, from culture to culture, and so that has been at the core of the union from the beginning, while acknowledging that the membership, whilst it does represent a large number of countries, it has been weighted towards the global north, and we've had to do some pretty active work to expand it and diversify geographically and culturally. But yeah, I might leave it for now.
Yeah. Well, since our network is mainly based in German language countries, we are the ones who profit from the system. Yeah, we live in the very wealthy global north. And so as a result, I have made the experience, which I regret, but I made the experience that it's difficult to discuss these issues. And people hesitate, and people are insecure, and they say, well, we cannot invite people who are involved with this. We have to talk with academics. They know better than the ones who are concerned. And I felt this is a typical sign of insecurity. So these are issues which we still have to work with, and we still have to reconcile with. We profit from the system, and to realize that we are profit on the expense of other people is very difficult and to discuss. Yeah.
Before we move to our participants on the screen, would you like to make any comments between you all? Just
I'd like to ask you a question, but this is a little bit...
Yes, please.
With your union, and you have this manifesto, and you want to fight against the system. I had this experience where we in Germany have now value chain law, and they want to make things better and more ethical and more responsible. And then when in Germany the industry was discussing this issue, one very high member of the textile industry told me, well, if this law is coming, there won't be any more fashion in Germany. Now the law came, we don't have any more fashion in Germany, I regret. But how do you tackle this issue that the industry has completely different attitude? How do you think you can change this attitude?
that last one, I'll respond personally and not as a union representative. I've been in fashion and sustainability research for 20 years, and in those 20 years, I would say, whilst our knowledge about fashion and sustainability has increased immensely. I mean, there weren't any books about fashion and sustainability 20 years ago, and now there are countless. At the same time, in those 20 years, the situation has got much, much worse. As we've heard today as well. So my answer is I don't know, because I have been in meetings with business, and I have been in meetings with organizations representing business, and it is very much like the comment that you received a lot of the time. Not always, there are exceptions, and I always try and focus on the exceptions, because we have to be able to work in some places, but yeah, I mean, it's the refusal to deal with the reality, which is in our news every week. I mean, we've all seen the news from Libya this week, and it's it's literally week after week it's a different country. Pakistan last year, cotton farmers in Pakistan were devastated by the flooding, and so. Like the reality is in our news on a daily basis about what's happening with our planet and how that impacts us, and yet there is this steadfast refusal to accept that reality and to act accordingly with that reality. And so I don't know how bad things have to get before some of those people start to listen to us. But anyway, sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
I hope not that far, so but we need to hold some space to create more actions in a space like this one. So moving to the screen, sorry to call you guys the screen, but Sophie, would you like to go first?
Yes. Yes, it's a very interesting question, but also very complicated in a way, because look, in Culture de Mode, what we try to do is with our research project, with the collaboration we try to develop between researchers. At least among our first project, the idea was to decentralize the study of French fashion. So for the moment, it's really French, looking at other spaces, at other geographies, at other actors than the ones that are usually studied. The question of colonization, of post-colonial studies, are still questions that are, I would say, complicated in France, are questions that some researchers refuse to address. You know, this is what I mentioned earlier, this idea that French fashion is only about luxury. So all the question about, for example, the cultural transfer in terms of techniques, ideas, material, techniques, know-how between African countries and France, it's still complicated to see a lot of articles, books, and projects on it, because it's still it's geopolitical. It's, as you know, France has a complicated history with colonization, and so it's still complicated. And what we try to do is to encourage this kind of project to really propose a more balanced history of fashion. And, you know, you have maybe all in mind the last fashion show of Dior and Chanel in India, in Mexico. And, you know, since a few years now, the idea of those brands is to celebrate know-how for abroad. But it's what is very hard to when we read the new the discourse of those brands, you know, we just want as researchers to say, yeah, but it's not new. You know, embroidery in India, it's not thanks to Chanel that India is pretty good, is amazing in embroidery. India has always been maybe, you know, the best, had the best master in embroidery since many years, many centuries. But in France, you know, when you read press article after a fashion show of Dior or Chanel, this is always this idea that French or the brand goes to Mexico and save the know-how of embroidery, for example, but it's not true. So this is what we try to do. I don't know if I'm clear, but the idea that we really need to deconstruct this idea that here in France we have invented everything while the other one has always followed us. And I think in terms of techniques of embroidery, especially with India and Mexico, this is a very important case. We really need to deconstruct this idea, and so this is something pretty complicated to do, but this is something we try to do within Culture de Mode. I hope I have been clear. Thank you.
Yes, you were. No worries. Everybody's laughing here. I know you cannot see them right now, but they just enjoy what you just said. So now we move to Matthew.
Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I take everything in. The technical things not really zoning in and out for me on my laptop, but I caught the most of it. I think I'll answer this question from both sides. So, as a lecturer, as my role as a lecturer at Central St Martin's, what I've realised is that teaching fashion education within the UK or within London specifically as being one of the places within the world where fashion is seen as a very high pinnacle point within the industry. I think the important thing to talk about is how we decentralize the conversation around fashion, style, why we teach in the way we do, the systems, the linear models within those specific spaces, and decenter them from these specific cities before we even talk about decolonizing fashion in general. Because if we think about crafts, if we think about the global south, if we think about techniques that have been taken from around the world and reappropriated within a Western fashion context, we have to talk about who is appropriating those contexts and who is thinking what is good and what is not. You know, what is style, what is something that is perceived as to be good fashion as opposed to something that is craft based. With Trash Club, we have recently did a project with the Orr Foundation. It was a collaboration as part of their Stop Waste Colonial campaign. It was called the Kantamanta Social Club Project. So basically this project worked with 10 designers in Accra in Ghana who work directly with Kantamanta market waste. So they're living and working within the market space. It was incredible to meet these designers and see what they're doing. but also to learn about how the reasons to why this exists follows the roots of the slave trade. You know, the way that our garments from the West are exported or imported to places in the global South, Cantamanta being the biggest market, and what these designers are doing. So what we did is actually brought the designers' work over and showcased it in this Western space. It was a very interesting project because for me, I was questioning why the designers were so interested in showing in this space. And they were saying it's because it is the center point of fashion. And that to me has sparked a conversation within myself and within Trash Club recently, where we're really trying to, you know, continue this project with them, but really trying to unpick and unravel why that's so important. Why we still view this space as being the, you know, the place to look to within fashion. Within Trash Club as well, the conversations of, I mean, Timo, you were explaining before, we have very similar conversations about, you know, translations or, you know, placing Trash Club within different spaces that's not in a Western context. And there's lots of different conversations that need to be had. The approach of being a creative in different locations is very different. The needs and necessities of being a creative is very different in different locations. So for me, the center point of the solution is conversation and collaboration and coexistence, because unless we start speaking to others who are not within our room, or not within our space, we're never going to decentralize or dismantle this hierarchy that's been created. So it has to come to conversations like this. Thank you.
It's amazing that we are having this conversation, right? I hope we are enjoying as we are here. So, you know, time is flying. It's almost 45 minutes that we are here. So, and before opening to the audience, to you have the chance to make questions, I would like to just the last and third round of questions, they bring the question of the idea of piece of advice, who is just entering the conversation now, who would like to engage on the fashion concept. Because as we read on the manifesto, the fashion must be a joyful process of community, as we are here gathering for that specific perspective. So I have then two questions that will one fold to another. So one is related to a question that Elizabeth asked us in when we are talking about how to organize the panel. That is related to how could networks based on particular locations, language, as Matthew just said, or disciplines support and engage student colleagues and research that many times, as Timo just said before, facing challenge to navigate or resistance to implement the fashion pedagogy, methods and values in their research on the institutions, how you could advise our audience or have some insights. Or also, if somebody out there who is following us online or here in the room would like to create a collective to engage on the fashion values, what would be the key actions they should not forget? Please don't be silent. Give us a help.
No, I was just, I think I've been listening to a lot of the conversations, and I tend to always fear
so these are more like political
how conversations can steer towards a very Western sort of idea of solution making. I'm at that point, and I think we're at that point at AFRI, is how much conversations and talking and, you know, identifying problems can people do.
Like political terms.
Instead of doing the work.
I think,
because you learn through
however,
doing. As an artist,
like,
I'm not one
as
here
you said,
that's
like
here
you
as an academic.
defined it was the best. I cannot say.
I'm one who deals with working with their hands. And it's collectively working with other people who also work with their hands that you start to ideate solutions to problems. And that's how our ancestors approached things forever. To us getting to this point that we have to think about legislations, that we have to think about UN rules, or whatever that may be the case, whilst important, how much doing are people doing for us to be able to say, find solutions per se. And I think for us, this year has been such an eye-opener because as South Africans, we come from a very privileged space sometimes, specifically from the continent. And I think personally, I was inspired or reminded to use what you have around you, not what is not there. And I think that's the issue with ingenuity, modernity, whatever you might think of it, is there's a sense of, I don't have this. When it's around us, we were talking about it today, the skills are our grandparents' skills that we're reverting back to. But it's also, how do we encourage more collaborations with people on a very level ground, not necessarily a top-down or trickle-down or whatever aspect that people use, very nice words, but, you know, can we actually create meaningful collaborations and not employ a very extractive sort of attitude specifically to those people that we are bringing over. You know, I always think the solutions are from within your country. So if Germans are not necessarily engaging with black and brown designers from their own country, that's already where you have to start with the problem, not so much bringing someone from overseas to tell you that.
Wow. It's interesting to hear because in Brazil, when we are talking about decoloniality in fashion, we must engage about race. And that reminds me that today I am wearing white because in Brazil, every Friday, to honor the ancestry, the Black African ancestry in Brazil, in the place now that I am doing research, we must wear white, and that's why I came here to demonstrate how I am also bringing with me what I have been learning there, and also to share with you the idea that clothes has this energy and power to create it in transversal discussion about race, and for sure, whiteness is something that we must address. We cannot forget anymore. Yeah. So just moving a little bit the organization, I would like to call Matthew again, and then, are you there? I think so.
Hello, yes, I'm here. Hi. Sorry, did I miss a question at the end of that? It's going in and out, the signal.
Wow, that was long question. So you're talking about how can we engage the fashion as a joyful process community? What piece of advice would you give for somebody who is facing challenge to implement, or with someone who would like to create a collective?
I'm actually wanting to start off by, sorry, I do have the questions in front of me. I wanted to start off by discussing our values actually within Trash Club, which is something that wasn't imposed within the community. We didn't know the community was going to happen. So it sort of organically evolved. And when we got to maybe say 50 members, we together collectively made this manifesto. So our 4 pillars actually, they stand for CRAP, which in England basically means rubbish or trash. And CRAP stands for consciousness, responsibility, authenticity, and people. It obviously applies to us directly, and we understand what it means within Trash Club. But the idea of thinking consciously, but also being mindful of your own mental health, well-being, holistic well-being, really directly relates to the responsibility that we have as creatives, as educators, as human beings, to stay authentic to ourselves. So making sure that our expressions and creative expressions are very true and honest, to our heritage, to our upbringings, to our interdisciplinarity, you know, and people as well, obviously, because people are at the center point of the community. And together, the relationships that we have and that we build together are what is going to make it strong in the future and how we develop further. For education specifically, and some sort of pointers, I was just making some notes as everyone was talking. I love the things that were being said. But this idea of dismantling hierarchy, I think, is a major one for me. within institutions, within faculties, the relationship of a teacher and a learner. I think the conversation of being taught is something that we should be having as well. The fact that we all need to be relearning, the fact that we all need to be learning from each other consistently. There should, in my opinion, there should be no hierarchy between a teacher and a learner, whereas in fact there's more of an exchange, or an exchange is happening. So my advice, I think, for anybody who is looking to start a community or a network or is in education and teaching, the idea that you can learn as much from your tutor as much as you can from your student is really important to consider, especially when we think about relearning, degrowth, and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, do you like to go, Timo?
Yeah, kind of started second-guessing my prepared response, especially because you spoke so beautifully before. But I'll go back to the code of conduct from the union, because I think it is. I am representing a union. I do want to just honor that. And one of the points in the code of conduct is the union keeps seeking to expand diversity in fashion and give space for voices that otherwise often remain unheard. The union acknowledges that with privilege often comes a sense of entitlement to take up discussion space, and therefore actively seek to calibrate contributions. And I think that's particularly those of us in privileged places like Australia or here in Germany or in the United States, where I lived for 10 years. To your earlier question about piece of advice, I think it's always healthy to ask who's not in the room, whose voices are not being heard, who is not being included, and being really honest about it, but also being not doing it as a kind of a self-flagellation, because that's not productive either, but really it's just honestly acknowledging who's not there, and then asking, are there ways to bring those voices in, or rather, what are the ways to bring those voices in? And often it's not easy, and it's also very easy to do it in a kind of a tokenistic way. It has to be authentic, and you also have to be prepared for the fact that sometimes when you bring other voices to the space, they might not align with your views, and you kind of have to learn to be okay with that too. And for people who've primarily known a place of privilege, that might not always be easy. But it is necessary, I think, to learn to be okay with views that differ from your own.
That was a good take, thank you. So now we can, do you mind if we go to France and then we come back to John? Sophie, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I think it's very interesting, what the discussion that we are listening to. I think, with Culture de Mode, I think what for us has been very important at the beginning, when we had the project of this research network, I remember the French Minister of Culture said to us, but it's a political project, because around the table, you will have first the people from different disciplines. And in France, we have these very big walls between disciplines. You will have people, designers, people from the academia, people from journalists, so not the same kind of person. And again, this kind of hierarchy, a scholar, maybe it can't be in the same room than maybe an archivist or a journalist. So, and it's true that at the beginning it has been an issue, because you also have the difference between private school, public school. So, we talked about having the same language, having the same, and it has been an issue at the beginning, because the idea was really to have a network where everyone was at the same level, around the same table. And it has been maybe for us what has been not complicated, but a challenge. And also, I think what for me is also very important, it's, at least in Culture de Mode, it's really to rely on research, to admit that we don't know everything, and that we are not in the center of everything, and that we really need to deconstruct a lot and look at other spaces, places. And that always, for me, the question of immigration, nothing is new in terms of import of textile from silk, of Indian fabric. Nothing is French, nothing, but everything has been considered as being French. So I think for us, what is very important is also, if you want to work with Culturedom, to admit that we don't know everything and that we really need to deconstruct. And it's really big deconstruction we have to do. And it's immigration in fashion, it's there forever. It's not a new thing. It's really, I think, a kind of responsibility we have to deconstruct what has been built these maybe 30 last years. Thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. So talking about my network and talking about collaboration, I think we see our task in spreading the word. So we have cooperations with museums, and we meet, we have conferences, and we have workshops, and then we work, for example, with the Textile Museum in Augsburg, and then we have a public event in the evening, and then the museum director, Karl Borromäus-Moore, talked about the history of consumption theory, which is very interesting, and then Nora Griffin about cradle-to-cradle system. So that was for the general public, and it was raining and storming and snowing. It was January, and people were coming. So that was very, very good sign, and I think this we will continue. In March, we will work with the German Textile Museum in Krefeld, and then they are also thinking about whom they can invite for the public event, and somebody from the city. And we are also thinking about politicians, invite politicians. So we are involving museums, cities, to discuss these important issues. And I think that's a way to spread the news, And then, since many of our members are teachers or teaching future teachers who teach children. So I think that's where one really has to start, with children. And it's not in the curriculum in Germany, unfortunately, sustainability. Many curriculum, we have a federal system, so every little state has a different system. And so that's what we're working on, so that these teachers will teach the next generation. And they're very engaged, and they really want to do it. So I think spreading the word, that's for us the method in collaboration.
Thanks. I think it seems that we touch base on different topics where race, power relations, privilege, immigration politics that we don't talk much in fashion, but it's basically based on that in many ways. Education, and also formulating a new perspective, how to decentralize everything that is already known as and not as what fashion with a big F means. So I hope we have time for 1 or 2, 3 questions. I don't know. Do you have time? Yeah. So let's open for questions. Who would you like to start?
On the topic of hierarchies, I wanted to ask, as academics and educators, do you think, as this is coming from a student, would you say that in terms of the fashion industry, when it comes to hierarchies and big brands and professors and top leaders, when it comes to decolonizing the system in the way that we're taught in education, is it more of a breaking down the hierarchies from within, or would you say it's, because I know Matthew mentioned hierarchies and breaking it down. Is it something that you do within the industry? I'm someone right now, I'm on my placement year and I'm working for a company, and I don't know if being in that space is right for me, especially between what I speak about within my work. It's very different to the environment that I'm in. So is it better to stay within that space, understand it for a short period of time, and then kind of, learn from the environment that I'm in and bring that down? Or is it more of just kind of saying no to the industry as a whole and seeing what's the best solution, ideally?
I think for us, it's we're flat. We're pretty much a flat sort of system. It's recognized that, sure, Lisiva and Erica kind of, I guess, are the posters of AFRI, but I think this year kind of showed how open we have to be. And I don't even see it as hierarchies. The way I explained it to CVU, who works with us, is sometimes you have to be the agitator So I was mentioning to, I think, Monica earlier, is that sometimes you have to be a thorn. We can't always be nice. But it's just understanding roles and responsibilities, and understanding that we all come with different skills, and no one is better because they have a certain type of skill. In actual fact, I find that, you know, it's important that I pull as hard as I can in a creative sense, because I know academically Erica is quite astute, so that we find ourselves in the middle. And funny enough, Siviwe has grown to be our soul. So she's there pulling in the other way to remind us that whatever capitalistic sort of benefits or you know, grants that we might get, that we always have Afri's soul intact, because she's the person who first joined us as a student and is now a partner, but she joined on certain beliefs. And I think that's quite pivotal, having beliefs intact, also understanding the company's beliefs and their roles. What they believe in obviously influences possibly what you believe in, and you know, if you find that there's alignment, that's how you can gain. But also if you feel as though being a thorn, so in other words, being in the industry serves the industry best, that might be the necessary sort of space to be in. But yeah, you've also got to counsel it out so that you're not necessarily always there.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, so thank you. I'll just first say one thing about universities, and I'll say it from an Australian perspective, because that's where I work and have worked for half of my 20 years in academia. In the Australian context, I would say university in itself is a very colonial construct, given that it's a country with 60,000 plus years of knowledge and knowledge systems that mostly is ignored by the university system and the type of knowledge that is valued and produced in universities. So those hierarchies, I think, need to be called out. And then to your question about should you stay in or should you do something else, I used to, as a fashion educator, I used to say to my students that for many years, and I kind of apologize for that now, that you should stick around and suffer a little bit and learn that way. Whereas now I say, if you experience being harmed by where you are, get the hell out of there, because you are worth so much more than that. Our industry should not cause harm to anyone. It should not cause harm to the workers. It should not cause harm to fashion interns. And like it should be an industry that creates joy and beauty in the world. And so if you are experiencing harm, just walk away. There'll be better things ahead.
Thank you for being honest, for sure. Elizabeth?
Yes. Well, this is my teaching experience in Germany. We don't have too many students with dark or black skin. And if they are excellent, they make excellent careers. But I do notice that many students have problems. And I think it's the responsibility of the universities to help these students. Because in Germany, the social background decides on what career you will make in later life. And I think the universities really have the task to get to these students who have talents, but they don't have confidence. They don't believe in themselves. And I think it's a task of the teachers and the professors to help these students to develop self-confidence so that they can make a career. I think it's also an educational issue, and it's our responsibility to help particularly these students who have disadvantages. I see that, yeah.
It seems to me that also is a question how fashion schools with the industry, they can also work together, because then they can create a path and hold space for when this kind of problem appears. Yeah. Matthew, you seem eager to talk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could we speak on the screen as well? That'd be amazing. I'm burning to say something. Can I ask where are you studying? Like,
sure.
In which country, which space?
It's Timmy. I'm studying at Central St. menswear. I think you know me, Matthew.
I can't see you, but I can hear an English accent. But no, so when you were speaking about this, so that's exactly what happened to me. So when I was interning, I also studied at Centre St Martin's a long time ago. But when I was interning in Paris, and I was interning at Louis Vuitton and at Chanel. I can openly say that now. When I was there, it was a time where the industry wasn't talking about sustainability. In the Western world, we weren't talking about sustainability in the way that we do today. So I felt myself in a very similar position to you, where I was very, very conflicted about what I was doing. I think the conversation this morning that happened, the panel discussion with Ray, he was mentioning the story of when he first came to fashion, and it was very similar to me too. And I think a lot of us, we don't choose to do fashion because we want to make the world a better place. That's not why you choose to study fashion. So arriving in that space that you've worked so hard to get towards, I can understand why it'd be so conflicting or very difficult to align with your ethics. What I would say is if you're interning within a space now, what I've seen is there have been, many young designers who have made big space or big conversation within the space or the sustainable space. There is that possibility, but also I think equally today, the power, of these big brands and these companies, if you're working within a company like that, you can make a lot of change. If you make a lot of noise within the space, similarly to how Lasiba was saying it before, if you're a thorn in that space, you can really start to have those conversations with the people that matter. So rather than just looking at your aesthetic or looking at your fashion for inspiration, they'll actually listen to what you're saying, hopefully. So I think that is also another possibility for you. What I would say as well is a lot of the students that we teach that I see now, they have so much knowledge about sustainability, decolonization, talking about ethics and value systems and how they want to make the world a better place. And it wasn't like that when I was studying. And I think a lot of the tutors as well might agree that it wasn't like that. So I think actually I'm very excited to see what this generation brings out of fashion education. But equally, I see that there are other ways of being educated now. Rather it could be experience or it could be through a traditional Western education system. So it's really up to you as an individual, but I would ask yourself what your ethics are and how you want to change the world and make it a better place. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Sophie, would you like to?
No, maybe just to add that, I think this is a question that some of our students ask always, which kind of change can we implement if we work in the big company? You were talking about Vuitton, Chanel. But I think it depends, as you were saying, on your value, your ethic, and what you do with your knowledge. And at least you can try. I'm not sure it works for me. I'm more pessimistic because I have some feedback from students who wanted to work in big beauty company and they have been very disappointed by the hierarchy. I remember one student who said, but oh my God, it's really about, like you said, it's really about hierarchy. So yeah, I think it's always an opportunity to see and then being able to deconstruct and reconstruct. I think it's, also just to not just say, oh, it's a bad thing. It's just to see, to be in the place, to talk to people, to then be aware of what happens and what you can do. I think it's always good to know and to know from the interior, from the inside. I think it's always interesting for me, but you don't have to stay forever. I think it's better to know than just relying on what the journalists say or what the professors say, I think.
Thank you.
Do you have time for one more question? No? Yes? There's one more question over there. One more question and then Yes.
Hi. So my question is about community versus uniformity. So I think with our exponential growth model that we have now, it's extremely influenced by our hyper-individualistic consumerist model. And actually something that's gotten me thinking about community versus uniformity is what's happening in France right now with the abaya. So France is known for its concept of laïcité, which translates into secularism. And essentially this means that in school spaces, like people are allowed to come but not display their religious leanings. And this is supposed to create like a safe environment. However, this is often targeted in France towards Islamic religions and not necessarily towards Christian or other faiths. And so my question is, what do you think, I mean, because a lot of the solutions that we've proposed come with finding community. So where do each of you stand in terms of the spectrum of community versus uniformity? How much of our individualism are we allowed to show to the point that it's dangerous? And how can leaning into these uniform solutions also be dangerous? Thank you.
Who would you like to take the question? Sophie, do you like to join the conversation? We raised many points on that topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, in France, it's not the first time we have this question with the abaya. We had the same with the burkini, and each time there is, as you have said, two arguments to schools. Some people say, it's for laicity, and it's since 1904. It's the séparation de l'Église and l'État. So yes, you shouldn't show your religious clothes. And the other part of the population thinks that but it's always against the Muslim population and against women especially. It's always a way to control women's body. So for that, I think it's very complicated, and it's also linked to our past history and our history of colonization and the art relation we have with former colony. But I would say that for uniformity and community, I'm not sure I will maybe correctly answer to your question, but I think when I look at the network, Culture de Mode, it's a community, but there are so many different individualities, so many different people from different fields. And of course, we need to defend, we have written a manifesto, and people who are members and from the network, they agree with the manifesto, but I think network are already a place of argument and discussion. And I think it's very important that, especially because the questions are very political in fashion more and more, I think uniformity is not maybe the key. I think I would say that discussion from different perspectives are the key. I don't know if I answer your question, but I think in Culture de Mode, it's different people from different fields, and they don't think the same. They don't use the same tool to research or to think. And I think this is what makes the richness of our discussions.
Okay, thank you. So I know Pierre has one question. Yeah.
It's a little bit related. So, Sophie, hi. As a French person as well, we maybe the two only French here. So you really pinpoint you highlighted the underrepresentation of French in this discussion. So actually, my question is, it's not really a question, but it's a question. Is there maybe space for radicality in Culture de Mode, because as well, like you're talking from a place of a certain privilege, a positionality as really the core of Eurocentricity in fashion, and so I'm wondering. And also, you do have contacts and you do have access to institutions and ministries and so on, from what I heard. So. My question is that, is there space or is there a marge de manœuvre in actually taking actions in Paris, using different tools such as, radical actions, whatever you think they are, and how this could be also useful alongside to building up this coalition of researchers and thinking through text and writings and critical thinking. Yeah, that's my question.
Yes, thank you for your question. So I think you're completely right. We have been partly funded by the Ministry of Culture. So it's true that if you take a look at what we do, it's not radical. We are not activists. we are researchers, curators, engineers, and some of us are activists, and are really convinced that maybe action would be better than just discussion. But I would say that first, we really believe in research. It can look a little bit naive, but we really believe that rethinking, that doing relevant research work, using reliable source for us is the key first. It's not about activism. It's more about research. For us to fight, for example, the fast fashion and the impact of fast fashion on the planet or on the people. I think we should all start by better understand what is at the origin of fast fashion and why we are here today. So we really believe in research, in publishing articles, in changing the way we teach fashion. So this is not radical, but I think for me, I think in France, when you published a book and you talk about the immigrants in fashion, or when you talk about the place of African countries on the French fashion map, it's radical in a way, because it has been never done. So I would say it's a kind of radicality, but at the first step. And I'm not sure that we can become this activist because other people do that maybe better than us, because for the moment also we are all working. I am in a university, another one is a museum. So yes, it's maybe a privileged institution, but we really believe that publishing articles, books, manifesto is a first, it's our first stone to c'est une première pierre à l'édifice. So I don't know if I answer your question, and maybe you disagree, but I would be happy to know more about what you think.
Follow-up?
Thank you very much.
I want to just, if I may, I think the question was how, right? And I would say community versus uniformity, but also assimilation. The question is, you have to deal with an inherited ideology. Yeah. And you have to think about how do you promote an ideological shift. And the thing is, I take into consideration the trip I did before I came to Berlin, which is in Denmark, in Aarhus. And it's a question I had from years back around Janteleuven, and how Janteleuven finds itself permeated not just in a fable, but in how architecture has been realized in Denmark, how people dress. So fashion education is also ingrained in that sort of belief of not feeling like one is better than the other person, or if someone comes in and wants to tell them what they do, they must be shut down, right? That's ideologically indifferent from anybody that comes from another space, that comes with, colors or garments or a type of wearing that doesn't necessarily toe the line. And I think that work needs to be done within those kinds of spaces. But on my last visit over the 3 years, I really found a really interesting new development where rails were being put outside in public, where clothes were being put out in display. And for me, that's radical. That's a radical shift from people who are taught to not necessarily put out something that I would see as an interior feeling or who you are internally. Because the idea is that how many of these people are students who went away and collected those clothes, and now for sustainable reasons they're putting it out there. But in actual fact, they're peppering the city with an identity which goes against the ideology that most people were raised on in that sort of space. So I think there is lights, it's the students or the people internally in the space that have to think about what's wrong with our society so that we can engage in changing, things like legislation. We can talk about changing things like curricula so that it is more inclusive.
Thank you. So there are a lot of questions, but we don't have more time. So I would like to thank our panelists for this wonderful conversation we had. For sure, we articulated exchange, and we know that we have a lot of in our plates to be done, to keep going and move the conversation forward. So thank you for being here with us today. And now we are moving to the next section with Sunny Delight.